Government corruption has never been more prevalent or caused more harm. It's why extremism is on the rise. It's why the financial gap between the haves and have-nots has never been wider. And it's why our planet is at risk of an extinction level tragedy. That's why I need your help to keep exposing the truth about the rot on both sides of the aisle. Become a supporter or a friend of the show today by clicking on the coffee link in the description box below. Friends of the show join me on a Zoom hangout once a month, and you guys can ask me any questions you want, and I can get to know you better. But the most important reason to help is to keep the show alive. Together, we can and will save our country and our planet. Thanks in advance and enjoy the show. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the show. I have a very special guest today. I'm really excited for you guys to hear her story and to get to know her better. This is Tasha Adams. This is the still wife of Stewart Rhodes, the founder of the militia group known as the Oath Keepers. Otherwise known here on our show as the Oath Breakers. So Tasha, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Of course. Yeah. As I mentioned to you when I reached out to you, I feel kind of a kinship with you because I was basically your children, as I understand from hearing your interviews and reading things written about your story and your children writing about their experiences. Stewart was my father, physically abusive, emotionally abusive. Can you explain a little bit about that to my audience so they understand how he kept you completely isolated and what he put you guys through?
From the outside, I think it certainly looks sort of different than a lot of abusive situations. He's done all these crazy things, and he went to Yale Law School and he started this big group. But on the inside, it was very much a typical abusive situation. Maybe some of the differences are that Stewart saw himself as this great man, this almost mythical figure, and it caused him to sort of filter the abuse. I'm not really exactly sure how to explain it, except that he tried not to be abusive in a way that he couldn't lie to himself, so it caused it to sort of stretch out a little while until it got really crazy, until we were completely isolated. And when we were isolated, we were really isolated. We were, by 2012, we were probably about 20 miles from cell service. The place where we lived through the bulk of Oath Keepers, about 7 years, was about an 800 square foot cabin, just in the middle of nowhere. He kept us most of the time without a vehicle. Finances were completely under his control, and he would travel around the country and fly around and route flights through his favorite airports so he could get his favorite steak dinners. And the kids were eating, we had apple chips and food storage. So that's how we lived. And and by the time we did leave, he had built a lot of connections and a lot of maybe not official relationships, but unofficial relationships with a lot of the emergency services and a lot of attorneys. And it was difficult to get out. We were locked down in more ways than just him.
Right. And you had 6 children with him, correct?
Yes.
Wow. And what were their ages when you finally were able to get yourself out?
I think when we finally got out, my youngest was 2 or 3, and then I had a 10-year-old, 12-year-old. I guess my middle daughter was 15 or so, and then I had 2 kids who were adults.
Okay. And so were they were already out of the home at that point?
Yeah. And that's really how we got out. They got us out. My son in particular, they had things like money and cell phones, cell service, cars, and that's how we got out. We may not have otherwise.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you were in the marriage for how long in total?
I guess it was about 24 years. Wow. Yeah, about 24 years. Yeah.
And I know I heard you on, I think it was Frank Figluzzi's show, saying you actually are the one who got him through law school. You were actually the reason why he has this law degree that he, holds up to prove that he's this rational, great guy who's intelligent. But that was your doing, correct?
Yeah, it kind of was. And he sometimes forgets to mention that he's been disbarred in 3 states, but
yeah,
leaves that part out.
Leaves that off the resume.
Yeah, I mean, he is very intelligent, but he has no work ethic. Like a lot of narcissist, abusive people. They're really lazy. They don't think of the future. So he was able to get himself through a lot of those very difficult classes. But when it came down to the everyday stuff, he would have me read course material and give him notes so that he could participate in class the next day. And, here's the chapter we're covering. What do I need to know? Like a politician getting a briefing before he goes out to the ground, that.
Wow.
And most of the time he would hit me with this stuff last second. Like he would never say, I need you to do all this work for me for the whole semester. But he likes to use emergency mode and crisis to control. And so he'd always hit you with something right at the last second. And it was always life or death. It was always, look how hard we worked to get to this point. Yeah. What if I failed out of law school now? What if I have to go back to parking cars for a living?
So all because manipulative.
Yeah, this thing's due now. And if you don't write it, I don't have time to do it. And our whole lives will be a failure because you couldn't write this. You couldn't help your husband in this one way.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow. So have you or your kids spoken with him since he's been arrested?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Wow. And do you remember where you were on January 6th and when you first realized that all of that was going down and that he was involved?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely watching it very close. I'd gotten pretty worried around November. I know that it seems like he's always unhinged, but being a lawyer, he's unhinged but careful, and he generally walks that really, really fine, precise line of what's legal and what's not. And I noticed in November he really started pushing that line, starts dropping words like civil war, and without any legal preface, if these terrible things were to happen, then a civil war would erupt. But instead, he's just talking about civil war. And it seemed very out of character, which immediately made me think there had been some sort of offer that he would be safe if he stirred up enough trouble that he would not wind up. He's crazy, but he's calculated and he's risk adverse for himself. So I thought that was really odd. Went right away because I don't trust myself because I know how I feel about him. So, for me to freak out over something, I thought, well, let me check it out. And so I went immediately to the different feeds of a lot of extremist experts who I follow. I went to JJ McNabb and Ryan Lenz and Nick Martin. A lot of those people used to work for Southern Poverty Law Center. Sam Jackson, who wrote the book on Oath Keepers. And they checked all their Twitter feeds and it's all they were talking about. So then I knew I wasn't, they had photos of his tweets and he was still on Twitter at the time. And then like, what is going on with Stewart Rhodes? This is very out of character. So then I knew I wasn't, just being hysterical.
Yeah.